Well, hello. Welcome to Nervous System 101. Now, I just did a little video on the bladder and some of the concerns and challenges of the bladder and how the bladder is so intimately connected to your body's stress response. In other words, your body's brain and nervous system. And I wanted to follow up on what's with the nervous system because I think that's going to be a very helpful sort of reference point for you as you're kind of doing your own internal audit of like, how's my body? What do I need? How am I feeling? So I'm going to give you the kind of Cliff's Notes in terms of the nervous system because the nervous system is a very big, broad topic. There is a ton of science and research and literature at this point on the nervous system. However, the thing that I found to be most useful when working with like real humans is just to keep it simple. So I'm going to give you my keep it simple sister sort of framework on the nervous system so that you can kind of use this as your own kind of self audit and just kind of getting curious about what state your nervous system might be in on any given day or any given moment of any given day. Okay. Now, why do we care about the nervous system? Well, the nervous system or your body's stress response is a system that is very wise. It is so intelligent, so wise, and very quick to react because it's there to protect you, and it's very old. So it's this very kind of ancient wiring in your body that is there to protect you. It's for survival. So way back in the day when we were hunters and gatherers, our nervous systems were very sort of primed up to keep us safe, right? To be able to run from threat or, fawn, maybe just falling and letting some wild animal sniff us. We were really primed up for threat. However, this day and age, now we are not being chased by wild animals or being stalked by wild animals. We are actually being threatened on a computer with our email or on social media. So this day and age, our nervous systems are under significant threat. And there's this whole barrage of stimulus that's constantly sort of vying for our attention. And that is what kind of stresses our kind of body and our physiology and our nervous systems out. And this is kind of the like sort of death by a thousand cuts dynamic where our nervous system is so perceptive. And sometimes when our senses, seeing, touch, smell, taste, sometimes when those senses aren't sensing threat, our nervous system is. So it's very subconscious in its sort of behavior, and it's very intuitive, it's very intelligent, it's like remarkable. That's why we're just going to scratch the surface and give you these kind of simple clip notes on what is the system, why do we care, and how do we kind of do a little sort of rough audit of how we feeling. So before we jump into the very simple framework, this is also very applicable if you are experiencing any type of like digestive issues like belly bloat, constipation, or diarrhea, or a combination of the two, or a fluctuation between the two. Bladder issues like I referenced in the bladder video, urgency, leakage, pain, because a lot of the systems in our kind of trunk, so think of like digestive system or genitourinary system, are so intimately woven with our nervous system. So, and that makes sense, right? Think back to the times where you may have like been really stressed about something. Maybe you interviewed for a job and you're just like waiting on pins and needles, like, did I get it? Did I get it? And your digestive system goes a little funky, you can't sleep. You're just kind of like waiting, right? And that kind of waiting and that kind of angst or just kind of like hypervigilance kind of lives, right, in different body systems compared to certain body systems compared to others. So or if you're really nervous about a big test or a race, or you're nervous about something, we tend to get nervous tummies, right? Same thing with the bladder. You can go back and watch the bladder video, but a lot of times our bladders will really, wave that white flag and signal like, hey, human, something's out of whack. And it'll start to become, more and more urgent. You feel like you have to pee all the time. Maybe you're leaking because your muscles are really tight and you're experiencing tension in your body. So all sorts of things can be triggered in the body. So the nervous system, Very old, very wise, very intelligent, designed to keep you safe, not always comfortable, unfortunately. But we can engage and kind of interact with this system. That's what I find so remarkable, is that while this system is designed to keep you safe, even without you having to make any like conscious decisions on what it does, um, because it'll react even when you need it the most. Like, think about if you are on a highway and you have to stop really fast. That's that nervous system, whoop, kicking into overdrive, pump the brakes, right? Before you even like register what the heck is going on. So this system is really designed to keep you safe. And while it has this kind of quick reaction, you know, once we bring this kind of up to conscious awareness of like what state we're living in any given day, you actually have the capacity to kind of mold and shape this beautiful system of the body. Now, a lot of times there's patience involved with this, right? Because it has probably many years of data points on what it thinks of as safe. So, you know, you may be kind of rewiring and reconditioning and deconditioning and then reconditioning again this kind of ancient wiring in your body. So I always think of the nervous system as having kind of two separate systems. Now, this is very simplified, okay? So if you have your PhD in nervous system, this is simplified, okay? Two systems. There's the kind of sympathetic. So this is the fight or flight, right? Or the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that's the system that we think of as the stress response. And then we have the parasympathetic, and that's the rest, digest, or the feed and breed. So this is the system where when our bodies are living within this kind of parasympathetic rest, digest state, our digestion is a lot smoother. You know, we can go potty more consistently. Our bladders are calmer. We can sleep better. We have more stable energy during the day. So life feels pretty good in that kind of rest, digest. This is where we're more likely to procreate, because the body in a female body, it won't want to create life if we're constantly stressed. So there are mechanisms in place to prevent a pregnancy if the body's just way too stressed. So this is why that kind of parasympathetic or rest, digest, or feed and breed, anything involving procreation or eating and digesting and flow and calm, that's that rest, digest, or that parasympathetic dial, right? The other dial, the stress response, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, that's technically the dial that tends to be dialed up for most humans, because look at the world we live in. Look at our modern day lifestyles. You know, there's a lot of go, there's traffic, there's high gas prices, there's, you know, putting your kids into all of the activities and getting them there and getting them to school and doing the job that you're doing and sending all the emails and doing all the tasks, seeing all the people. Like, life feels pretty big, you know. The plates we carry are really robust anymore. So it stands to reason that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, that sympathetic dial is dialed up for most people. Now, I'm going to do a separate video on kind of those specifics, but just know that there's kind of two different states that our body will fluctuate in and out of. And also know that the state is not like an on-off. It's not like one is on and the other is off. They're always kind of on at the same time. It's just which one is dialed up a little bit more and which one is dialed back. So a really nice kind of question or audit to yourself is just like, how am I feeling? You know, how am I feeling? Seems really simple to ask yourself that, but how often do we stop and kind of go, how am I feeling? Like, we just know we're being kind of pretty, we're like, you know, just full steam ahead. You know, like, we often know how we're feeling. We're feeling stressed. We just stay in that spin cycle without actually pausing and going, hold the phone. How am I feeling? What do I need? Right? Because ultimately, no one's going to stop us in that spin cycle, probably but us. And oftentimes the body is so amazing in how it's designed that if you don't stop in that spin cycle, the body will probably stop you itself. So I know that sounds a little grim, but it's true. How often do people end up in a position where they've been in this kind of sympathetic kind of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode and go, and they're exhausted, they're overly busy, overcommitted, they have all the things, they've got to do it all and do it all with a smile, and they just tank, right? And this is where the conversation, especially in women's health, starts to expand into kind of the function of our brains. We have, foggy brains, we can't think, we are forgetting words. We're tired. We're really tired during the day. We experience cravings where our body's like, I need sugar, I need some glucose because I'm tanking. And then at night, once we hit the pillow, we're exhausted, but we can't sleep. So there's a lot of that imbalance that happens in all of the body systems, whether it's the brain and nervous system, the cardiovascular system, right? The heart palpitations happen when we're in that kind of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. Digestive issues, belly bloat, constipation, diarrhea, bladder concerns, leakage, pain, urgency, painful intercourse, like the list goes on. So that kind of fight, flight, freeze, fawn dial is very, very potent and powerful. And a lot of times it's very kind of inefficient for our bodies to be in that state for long term. So this begs the question of, okay, when we do kind of pause for a micro moment and ask ourselves, what do I need? How am I feeling? Then what, right? Like, what's the next little micro step of like, do I just need to take a big deep breath? Do I just need to touch base with that chambered breathing in order to kind of dial back from like a 9 out of 10 on the fight flight scale in order to dial that parasympathetic or that rest digest up from a 2 to a 3, right? So I always kind of view these as dials on how there are certain practices and things that you can do for and with your body that will help kind of to turn the dials, down or up, depending on which dial you are aiming to see a shift in or experience a shift in. And then, of course, there's a little bit of patience of like the more devoted you are to kind of doing this audit and developing a set of practices or tools or, herbal or food remedies or community resources, then little by little these dials can shift. So all that just to say, much like in our bladder video, there is something that you can do for this when you feel like your body is constantly in this kind of like revved up or high octane state or buzzy state. Or I recently had somebody, a woman in her 40s, say, I feel like there's a bunch of ping pong balls within me and they can't stop. I just feel like I'm just buzzing and kind of vibrating, and I have a hard time resting with that. So that's very much that kind of, fight, flight, freeze, fawn dial. So, and again, I'll elaborate on those different states and what they might look like and feel like for different people. And again, you can kind of put in your own sort of details in how you feel, because we're all different. Our makes and models are different. Our constitutions are different. Our environments are different. So the way that you experience your nervous system is going to be different from how I experience my nervous system. But this is definitely one of these, said this in the bladder video, kind of one of these gifts that keeps on giving, is to kind of become a little bit more aware and in tune of how your nervous system is feeling. Because if that fight, flight, freeze, fawn dial is really dialed up, life is going to feel a lot more exhausting. There's going to be more symptoms in the body and in whatever body system that tends to be your canary in the coal mine. Sleep is going to be harder to come by. If you are in a position of trying to conceive, that's going to be more difficult. So, just things get a little bit stickier. And so, being able to develop this relationship with what it feels like to even, invite in practices in life that help to kind of calm, nurture, rebalance, regulate, downshift, kick back, relax, that's huge. And this is what, I think that people used to do a little bit more naturally before the World Wide Web came into play. So that's a story for another time. But all that just to say, getting curious about, well, am I in rest digest or am I fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? And what does that look like? So I'll do another video on kind of the differentiation between the 4 states within that sympathetic or that stress response. So that way you can kind of get a little bit curious in terms of like getting more granular on like, okay, which state do I tend to be in? And I've got some pretty powerful examples. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, just enjoy getting curious about your nervous system and how remarkable it is, and how it's really there to be a companion, not a torture device, but sometimes it can feel like it, but you can make some really powerful shifts within. So stay tuned for the next video.